Hey, welcome back to High Ticket Woman. We are here in the Experts Corner with Shaunis Mercer. She is a family law and estate planning attorney and the co owner of Peaceful Law, a firm dedicated to helping families navigate separation and plan for the future in a thoughtful, amicable way. Alongside her husband and law partner, Chris Autry, she focuses on guiding clients through life transitions with clarity and respect. How nice. With 2 decades of experience, Shaunis has seen firsthand how the right approach to legal planning can make a difficult transition easier and provide long term peace of mind. She believes in keeping things straightforward and helping clients move forward with confidence. Beyond her work, Shaunis is active in her community, volunteering in local schools, taking on pro bono legal projects to support those in need. And she's also a mom to two boys, a fan of good coffee, me too, and weekend getaways, me also, and someone who's always up for a conversation about balancing work, family, and everything in between. This should be a fun conversation, Shaunis. Welcome to the High Ticket Woman.
Thanks for having me today, Debbie.
This is great. Okay, so some of my listeners are going to go, so she's a divorce lawyer?
Right.
So let talk to me about, which is fine, nothing wrong with that at all. But for a show that's all about like saving your relationship, we don't often talk about the other side of this. And I think that's an important conversation. So talk about what peaceful law does. And when you talk about separation, are we primarily talking about divorce, or are there other kinds of situations that people would benefit getting your legal assistance from?
Sure. I think that that's a really good question because, I'm happily married, have 2 kids. My goal is to stay married, but sometimes there are situations in life to where you don't have a choice, and you've put everything that you can into your marriage, and you're coming up at for some reason, at a crossroads where, staying together is not going to be the option moving
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah,
Um
unfortunately, that does happen, yeah.
And I see it for people who truly have given it everything that they have, and they come to that crossroads, but they understand that in moving forward, they want to do it in a way that honors and, reflects the past that they do have together with this person, oftentimes with children involved, and so we help families to be able to navigate that time, in a way that they can look at that other parent, at the baseball games, at the
Mm.
graduations, and be able to do it in a way where there's not that, lingering regret, resentment, that so often comes from nasty court battles, and again, it's better for families. We found been doing it for 20 years, done it both ways, done it in the very not
Yeah,
amicable way,
yeah.
and then this way, and I think that what I've seen is that this serves families very well to be able to move forward, in a way that offers some dignity to, honor the things that they have between them, and to be able to do it in a way that they can be respectful with
This
each
is
other.
fascinating to me because really what you're saying is it sounds like you guys are both attorneys and therapists because people who are coming to you, for a divorce often don't feel amicable towards each other, but you're really essentially encouraging people and helping them take the high road. I use that term a lot when people get to this point in their relationships, like take the high road. Can you speak to that a little bit? Because I'm sure you see a lot of animosity, maybe initially in working with people.
Yeah, absolutely, and taking the high road, we take the high road for a lot of different reasons, and we are amicable for a lot of different reasons, and I think
Mhm.
that being able to center on what are your goals moving forward,
Mm.
can be a really helpful tool, to help people to see that being amicable and taking the high road offers a whole lot of value for themselves as well as for their kids if there are children involved, for why that's the right thing to do. So being amicable doesn't always mean that we're holding hands and that we feel, happy, warm feelings towards the person that
Yeah.
we're separating from, but it does mean that we can stay goal oriented, and, work towards those goals and keep the emotional piece separate. And I'll tell you, I stay in my lane. I am a big believer that everybody going through divorce can benefit from having a therapist. And we are referring our clients to mental health professionals in that first
Mhm.
consultation that I have with them, because that
Yeah.
can help them to do a lot of that internal work, so that they're able to stay focused on the amicability of the legal
Yeah.
process.
I mean, what you're really saying is you're helping them to see the big picture, like down the road, what's the big outcome that you ultimately want? Like what you're feeling right now isn't how you're gonna feel, emotions shift and change. So the hurt, the disappointment, the confusion, the anger that you feel right now isn't where you're gonna feel, 6 months or a year or 5 years from now. So what's your ideal big picture? Like, do you want your kids to have a relationship with their mom or their dad? Do you want to be able to peacefully co-parent? Do you want to be able to have, as good a communication as you possibly can about things that related to the kids when other people get brought in, other partners get brought in, what outcome do you actually really want? You're talking about the big picture here.
That's right. And do you want to keep more of your money? Because I'll tell you this, settling a
Oh, yes,
case
there's not too.
settling a case amicably is gonna mean more money for college, more money for weddings, more money for all of those things that are really
Yeah.
important to people, instead of wasting it all on attorneys.
Yeah. A lot of people have this image of I mean, I work with people who, despite our best efforts, decide to divorce. And I always say to people, because I do so much work with couples, I always say to people, my success isn't that you stay together because that can't be on my shoulders. So many people wait. I think research shows that the average couple waits 6 years too long to get into therapy to save their marriage, right? So, as I always say, it's like they're dangling off the cliff edge and now they want, a therapist to come in and sort of pull all that back and fix that. Okay, that's right. Almost virtually impossible. So when we get to this point, I hear a lot of people say, "I don't wanna get attorneys involved. That's really expensive," and it almost seems like the moment attorneys get involved, like, things really get out of hand for those people. They're not allowed to talk to each other anymore. The attorneys, are battling with each other on behalf of the clients. How so you're nodding, so so, I mean, there is sort of that reputation out there for divorce attorneys, but you guys obviously do it very differently.
Yeah, we don't do it that way.
And
And I think that, it really there is I understand why attorneys do that, right? They're thinking strategically, they're thinking about winning their case, but really in divorce, we have to recognize that when you're talking about matters that involve families, it's just different, and a win means different things to different people, and it's important as attorneys that we talk to our clients and we learn, what we were talking about earlier, what their goals are. Is their goal to eke out every single dollar that they possibly can from the other person, or, is at the expense of what? And we have to be really clear in communicating with our clients what the risk versus the benefits are of these choices that we make to move into these entrenched camps and to fight against each other, from behind our walls. And that doesn't serve most families. For most people, what I'm gonna encourage them to do is to continue to have that open communication,
Mm,
with their spouses they're separating, to talk about what their goals are, what they think is best for their kids,
mhm,
and for them to be having those conversations together if it's safe, if it's appropriate,
mm,
obviously with those protections in place, but for most families, it is. For most families, the people that are gonna be able to make these decisions best are the people who are living in it, who know their finances inside and out, and who know their kids inside and out to know what's really gonna best serve, their family instead of a judge making those choices for them.
I love that. Just out of curiosity, do you ever find 2 people deciding to stay married because the process of talking all this out with you guys sort of facilitating that helps them realize, "Hey, if we can communicate amicably about this, why can't we fix the other problems in our marriage?" Has that ever happened to you?
Yeah, so that hasn't happened in that exact way, but what I do have happen quite frequently is that someone will come in for an initial consultation because they're considering divorce. And so when we talk about that, we call our initial consultations peaceful blueprint sessions, because
Love that.
isn't that it's, because what the goal is to talk about what your different paths are moving forward and talk about the pros and cons of each of those different paths that you could potentially take. And for that initial consultation, for most couples, what we are talking about is what happens if you stay together? How do you make that path be successful if that's a path that
Mhm,
you're considering? And so
mhm,
many times people who come in for initial consultations, the goal is just to find out what would happen if they separate, what those financial consequences would look like. But they're
mhm.
going back with referrals for, marriage counselors who are going to be able to help them to, work towards whatever reconciliation is possible based on that sort of acute event that led them to come into my office. So I
So it
do.
sounds like you're in that beginning stage, you're 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 what's the word I'm looking for? You're taking this neutral position of like, I'm not trying to, get your business, help you decide that this is the right decision for you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't there's plenty of business, right? There will
Yeah.
always be enough
There
business.
unfortunately. Yes.
There will always be enough business for us as,
Yeah.
divorce attorneys. But really that's not our only role. We're not, we really see ourselves as family attorneys and that our goal is to help people during those periods of transition to find the right path for them. And so, yeah, so often my goal is that everybody, when they're first starting to consider separating, that they come in to see us at that point so that we
Right.
can get them connected with other holistic resources that they may need, therapists, financial advisors. So often when people
Mhm.
come to see us, one person has complete blindness to the finances, and I think that's really not a healthy
Oh,
dynamic. Uh,
yeah.
so I think that sometimes getting those other professionals in place,
Mhm.
can help improve that dialogue between the couple.
Yeah. Where are you located? I'm assuming you can only work with people in your state?
Yeah, so, we're in North Carolina, so we
Okay.
serve clients all across the state here in North Carolina.
Mhm.
I'm also licensed in Washington, state,
Great,
so,
okay. So you
so,
can you can work with people in Washington as well?
I could. We don't currently have an office there. We're not open there, but that is certainly in our plans, as our firm
Mhm.
continues to grow to open.
You need to move to Texas because that's where the bulk of my clients are.
I mean, it's not out of the question. I have a very close friend who is a family law attorney down there, and we talk about it all the time.
All the time. I love that you call yourselves family attorneys as opposed to divorce lawyers because that's a mindset shift in the way that you perceive what you do. It changes how you approach your job. I love that. Okay, I wanna sort of switch gears here a little bit because I'm really intrigued by the fact that you and your husband work together in this. And so day in, day out, you're seeing these people who are considering ending their marriage, and you're helping them walk through that with grace and dignity and respect, towards their soon to be ex-spouse. How has this impacted your relationship with your husband?
Yeah, I think it makes our us be able to put into perspective the little problems that we may have at home, right? We're able to sort of see the big picture and
Yeah.
really see the impact of how important communication is, how important, being open and transparent with one another, is in just, like, the little things because I see so often these, like, little grievances that just sort of pile up over time and over the
Yeah.
years. Yeah, like, what a crumbly way to be, but also, like, we're able to let go of a lot of things too and put it into perspective,
Yeah.
because, the little things that he does, could never, I would never want to have to be into a point where I feel the way about him that I see that those
Yeah.
sorts of, like, tallying up of wrongs can lead to in relationships.
I always say, and I think about myself and my own marriage, if I don't even remember what I was annoyed about, like even an hour later, it was definitely not worth renting any space in my head, let alone, being frustrated with my husband about and so much of the grievances, as you say, that husbands and wives have towards each other are those little petty things that we attach meaning to, and make assumptions about, and they never ever really get resolved. It's crazy to me how those little things add up to be this big, somehow insurmountable problem. And so the fact that you guys are interacting every day with people who've let that happen, I imagine, yeah, it's made you guys really intentional. You talked about balancing, or in your bio, you talked about balancing work and family. And I work with my husband too. He's my video editor and my sound editor for the podcast and everything. And I love, love, love working with my husband. Like, he is good at all the things that I'm not good at, right? He doesn't wanna be in front of the camera, he wants to be behind the camera, So if I'm filming a new course, he's setting up all the lights and, running the camera and doing everything. It's great. Um, but some days people can be really challenged by working with their partner. I'm just curious, like, how do you guys manage that? Because some of our listeners probably are wondering that. Maybe they work with their partner, maybe they're like, "I would never work with my spouse." How do you do that?
Yeah, and I understand that. It's not for every couple. It's
Yeah.
not it doesn't work for everybody. The reason why it works for us is exactly what you described, is that we, um, understand and almost revere the other person's strengths, So
Love that.
we're very careful. I have the utmost respect for his organizational skills, for his, ability to keep things tidy, and he has, a tremendous respect for my creativity and my ability to juggle a million things at the same time, and so I think that it's really, um not again, it's sort of what we were talking about with the reason, how we keep things into perspective is I'm not annoyed by those things about him. I appreciate and respect that there's somebody that's taking care of those things so that I don't have to do that, and I try to be very respectful of his need for tidiness, so I do my best to not make his job harder than it needs to be if I can.
It's funny how, people often opposites attract, and, I'm a big believer as a faith-based person. I believe God gives us attraction to the opposite sex because it's our opportunity to learn and grow and develop patience and respect for those differences, not hammer away at them, but to go, "You do that differently than me, and that's actually a good thing." But sometimes it frustrates me, but I have to learn how to manage that frustration. If we just always married people who are exactly like us, I think that would be kind of boring.
Well, and it's almost competition on some
Yeah,
level if
yeah,
it's someone that wants to do the exact same things as
yeah. And they're equally as good. So, okay, you're right, it's competition. Okay, so circling back around to the business, what advice would you give people who, because, a lot of people aren't gonna be in North Carolina, so how do they go out and find what kinds of things should they be looking for in an attorney who is as focused as you on helping couples take this high road in having an amicable separation and divorce? What should they be looking for?
Sure. I think that there's a really clear litmus test when it comes to that. You might have to dig a little deeper in some other ways, but I would say that if you find an attorney who's offering collaborative law as one of their areas of practice, that's a really good indicator that they have at least had the training and tools available to understand how to handle things in a different way than our traditional litigation structure
Mhm.
that most family law cases are handled. So, collaborative law professionals, that's a really easy indicator that they've got that set of skills.
So, tell me a little bit more about collaborative law, because I've never heard about that before. My guess is our listeners haven't heard of that before. So, that's a specialized training as an attorney?
It is. So it's a different way to handle family law cases.
Mm.
When you agree to take a collaborative, and you might hear some professionals say, big C collaborative. So we don't just mean collaborating in the more general sense, but it is an actual intentional way of handling your family law cases where, what that means in our state is that, both parties are gonna sign an agreement with their attorney that they agree not to litigate their case. They agree that if they do need to litigate, that they'll go and hire another attorney to represent them.
Mhm.
They cannot use the same attorney who's working in the collaborative law setting to handle their case in litigation. Um,
Interesting.
so it's again, it's setting that intentionality and it's putting your money where your mouth is that you're gonna
Yeah.
work this out. And then the other thing that's different about collaborative law is it changes the dynamic. It's not about hiding things like you were talking about people retreating and only communicating through their attorneys. Collaborative law is the exact opposite of that. We have
Mhm.
meetings between, you know, each attorney and their clients. We're all sitting together at a table having a conversation. We're putting all of the assets up on the wall together and looking at the money and trying to figure out what makes the most sense for this family moving forward in two separate households so that there's enough for everybody, so that those
Mhm.
goals for the kids are kept to be top priorities. And then we bring in other professionals to that conversation as well. We bring in, financial neutrals and people that are that focus just on what's best for the child. And we bring those professionals to the table to have that conversation and dialogue with us so that
Mhm.
they have input and we're making the best choices for that family, not based on who's got the best strategy or who's able to, spend the most money in court, but it's really about all of the information coming together and working together to find the best solution for this family.
I've never ever even heard of this process, and I'm amazed in a really positive way that there are attorneys out there who are doing this. So, just to understand this process better, if I came to you saying, I think I want to separate, that's never going to happen, but let's pretend that that's happening. Do I hire you guys to represent me, but my husband has to go hire a different attorney, but also they need to be, a collaborative attorney in order for you to work with them?
Sure. So that's a good question, and the answer is like this is the typical attorney answer for everything. It depends. So that's what we always say.
Okay.
You do always have to have separate representation. At
Mhm.
least, from my perspective, and what our ethics opinions say is that it is not appropriate in a divorce for one attorney to represent both parties.
Mhm.
Because of our role as attorneys, that's not
Mhm.
appropriate. But in our firm, for instance, we handle cases, we use the blanket term amicable settlements is what we focus on. One of the
Mhm.
tools in our tool belt is the collaborative law process. So
Mhm.
that is one of the options that we would present to our clients as
Oh,
a path
okay.
forward, to handle their case. I love collaborative law. I think it's great. I talk to every attorney that I
Mm.
can in my community about why this is a great, opportunity for us to really serve our
Mhm.
clients better. But not a lot of attorneys practice collaboratively. And
Mhm.
so we offer other ways to get to amicable settlements as well. But if somebody is
Mhm.
interested in collaborative, then I'm going to give them referrals to take to their spouse of other attorneys who also, follow the collaborative law process,
I
that
see.
then they could, talk with those attorneys and see who the right fit is for them, and then
Mhm.
we could proceed on that collaborative path. A lot of attorneys in my area do handle cases, outside of court in an amicable way, but it's a more traditional path to get to an amicable settlement where we do go to our separate camps,
Mhm.
because, both people want to be fairly represented. They want to make sure that they understand what they're doing. Again, we're most of the attorneys that I work with are still encouraging people to have those conversations
Mhm.
together, so that we
Mhm.
can best serve their interests, but we take a more traditional approach in those cases of somebody drafts up an agreement, we pass it over to the other side, they redline, potential changes, and we pass a draft back and forth. That's a
Right.
really common way to get to a settlement. And then
Right.
sometimes we do creative things. There are attorneys in my area who are open to us just having like a settlement conversation. So a less formal version of that process where we figure out what it is that we agree on. And then we focus on those areas where we need some clarity and exchange more documents so that we can come to an agreement.
So, is a mediator used at all through this process of the amicable divorce or amicable separation?
That is another tool that's available in our tool belt. And so most of the time, what that looks like is maybe we set a mediation from the first day that we are representing the client because we know that there's going to be a need for a neutral third party to help us to get to that resolution. We know that we can keep it out of court, but we're gonna need somebody else to help us get there. And, some attorneys just prefer that as a way of practice. So I know that if someone comes to see me and there are certain attorneys on the other side, we're just setting a mediation date because that's the way that they practice. That's the way that they understand getting to amicable resolutions. So that's what we do. Other times we will have passed that draft back and forth and we'll have just like 2 or 3 issues where we just can't get it settled. And so then we set the mediation, and then we choose that third party neutral who's going to help us to settle those last few issues.
Okay, cool. So, I tell clients a lot there are 2 kinds of separation. The kind where you know you have to stop whatever dynamic is going on between the 2 of you, and the best way to do that is to not be under the same roof, but you still really wanna try to work on the relationship. And then the other kind that is like the, precursor to divorce. So, if 2 people want to separate, but they are still not convinced or, wanting a divorce, is there benefit to going through a legal separation?
So in my state, we don't have that traditional legal separation. A separation begins in my state when when the parties begin to live separate and apart, and one person intends for that separation to be permanent. So that is the beginning of the period of separation. And in North Carolina, you're required to be separated for over a year, so a year and a day before you could file for that absolute divorce, in my
Mm,
state. So that's a whole other issue. We settle most cases pretty quickly with a separation agreement well before that 1 year cooling off period has passed. But for families that you're describing, where maybe they need a temporary separation to work on the marriage from separate physical locations, I do a lot of interim agreements, or even temporary separation agreements because I do think that it's good in what you're describing for there to be clear boundaries and an understanding of what the rules are during this period of time, that the people are living separate. So for us, a lot of times that involves what are the financial arrangements during this time? Who's paying for what? What happens if this does become a permanent separation with those funds that have changed hands during that temporary period? And then the other part is what happens with the kids? Um,
yeah, visitations and
yeah.
yeah, and that you can make verbal agreements, but if there's not something that's in writing to hold each of you accountable, then the efforts to reconcile get messed up with, the assumptions over just though, some of those things. It makes your job harder. This, you said you were gonna pay for that, and you haven't, right. Okay, so couple more questions that have just sort of popped into my mind through all this. I think the big one, the big elephant in the room is what what should people expect this to cost? And how are there different ways that different attorneys charge for this process?
So this is one of my favorite things to talk about, actually. Wait, just
Oh, all right.
because that's really the thing is I think that for so long, attorneys have not been transparent,
Yeah.
in talking about money with their clients, and I think that it causes a lot of friction, between attorneys and clients where it causes clients to almost feel like they're in an adversarial role with from their attorney, and so how can you be same team and trust this person to be working for you if you're having to fight with them about the bills?
Absolutely.
So I do think as attorneys, we can do a much better job of being more transparent with our clients about our fee structures. And that's something at our firm that we do, and we believe that flat fees are the best pricing model that, it help our clients to have, really known, fixed costs that they can count on through the process. They understand what each step of the way is going to cost for them so that they can plan and budget accordingly. I think that, some of the worst things that I've seen in my career are when a client gets a bill and they're like, "Oh my goodness, I never would have seen you had you to be fighting over those corn cob holders had I known that
Right.
it was gonna cost me, $3,000 to go
I
back
know.
with the
Right, you see these things on TV shows, right? Like, "Oh, they're billing me out $500 an hour, and 15 minutes is an hour, and so I don't wanna talk with my attorney about this because it's gonna cost me so much money." Yeah.
Yeah, and so we break down those walls. Again, I think that I've been doing this long enough. I know what it's gonna cost to get to the end of a case. I know how to communicate with my clients in a way that we're gonna be able to be transparent. I'm not gonna have to clean up as many messes because somebody didn't wanna pick up that phone call for that 15-minute call to be billed for it. So they make a choice without asking me what they should do. And so then Monday morning, I'm having to go into court on an emergency because somebody took a child or moved funds that they shouldn't have moved. If I can get clients wanting to communicate with me, wanting to front load me with information, we can resolve cases faster and we can get better outcomes for clients.
I love that transparency. I'm working with a coaching company right now where we had an amicable meeting yesterday, but prior to that, I was getting pretty frustrated with him because of a lack of transparency that has been impacting my business. And so to have you've taken the people's false perceptions of what this process should be, or is going to be, and you strip that away by just being upfront and honest, right from the very get-go. I love that. That's awesome. Do people typically, like, when they, are considering divorce, is that first initial meeting typically with a divorce attorney, is that a free consult or no?
So it's not for our firm, and I think that you'll find that more experienced attorneys are not offering free
Mm,
consultation. Um,
okay.
and the reason why that is in my office is because the appointment that we have, I'm adding value. I'm giving you something in that meeting that
Yes.
actually has value, and I'm
Yes.
committing to you that I'm not going to take your spouse's case. I'm putting that on the line by having that meeting with the potential
Mhm.
client that I cannot represent the other side of the case, and so we do paid consultations. Um, Free consultations, absolutely when you're a younger, newer attorney, you're trying to
Getting
open up
started.
that funnel and get
Yes.
more people coming in. I understand why that is an
Mhm.
option. I think what you'll find in those cases a lot of times is, what you get for free is a sales pitch for buying services, not
Yeah.
necessarily, a value session where you're actually going to have key takeaways of what next steps for you actually should be.
I like that. That's something that I is applicable to me in my business too. Yeah. Okay, so as we wrap this up, is there anything that you want our listeners to know about this process, any aspect of it that I haven't asked you about?
Like, let's see. I'd say, the number one thing to remember when you're going through this process is that, um, it's hard to go backwards.
Mm,
So it's really important that you be really thoughtful before you make the next move forward. And that's why it's really important that you're doing things from the very beginning of having a therapist that you're working with. I mean, again, I think that individual therapists when you're going through divorce are really important to help you to, um, regulate yourself, to take care of your own personal needs, and so that you can make sure that you're addressing things objectively and not making missteps along the way. The same thing with, put all the effort that you can into saving the marriage.
mhm.
If this is something that you think, is worth fighting for, then you should absolutely be as committed as you possibly can to doing that. But I say that, as a divorce attorney, I would say that you do that, but with eyes wide open about what the different paths forward could look like. And so I think that having that initial consultation with an attorney doesn't mean that you're going to get divorced. It just means that you're learning and understanding all of
You're
the
gathering
potential
information. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And
But we can't make informed decisions unless we understand the process and
that's
gather the information.
the fear of it, I think, is,
Yeah.
it's worse for marriages in so many ways because, you know, you can't focus on the healing or moving forward because you're only staying there out of fear of the unknown of what would happen. So I'd rather rip that Band-Aid off. Let's talk about what the worst possible scenario is, what
Mhm.
things could happen, so that then you can go into if you're committed to healing the marriage, you can do it with eyes wide open with what your future could look like if it does or does not work.
I love that. That was fantastic. I'm gonna refer everybody to you guys, and they're gonna have to move to North Carolina to How does that work? If I got married in Texas, but I wanna get divorced in North Carolina, is that a thing?
So, jurisdiction is different everywhere. North Carolina, you gotta live here for 6 months before we can start working.
Okay, alright. So everybody, you gotta live in North Carolina for 6 months before you hire Shaunis and her husband, but after 6 months, then you can do it.
Absolutely, but
Shaunis
I'm always glad to
go
give referrals if there's anything that I can do to help anyone, I'm always glad to
yeah.
connect you with other professionals.
You know what I really, really love? I think obviously I would love to drum business up for you guys. Not that you need it, but because unfortunately, divorce is never going to go away. But the most important thing that I want listeners to hear is you, Shaunis and her husband, are not the only two people out there in this field who want to help you have the best outcome. They're not just money grubbing, greedy, horrible people because they're attorneys, right? They have your interests at heart. And if that means reconciliation of the marriage and they don't get paid for, divorce, so be it. That's that's what and that mindset is the most important mindset, whether you're in therapy, to save the marriage or you're now working on a divorce with an attorney, that mindset is what you need to be looking for because that is in you and your partner's best interest and your kids' best interest always. That is a fantastic way to handle this process. Shauna, thank you so much. I love that I was able to even learn that this exists. I'm gonna tell everybody about you guys, whether they live in North Carolina or not, because 'cause I'm just so impressed with this. So
Thank you so
thank
much.
you.
I appreciate that, and it's good for people to have the information to know that there is a different way because I don't think
Yeah,
that it's that well known.
yeah, and collaborative law. Who knew other than attorneys that there is such a thing as collaborative law? Now I'm gonna get a bunch of comments. "I knew, I knew, I knew." Well, I did not know. So I love that I have learned about this because even though I'm never gonna need a divorce attorney, unfortunately, I have to sometimes refer people to them, so Shaunis, thank you so much today for being on the High Ticket Woman, and these are important conversations that need to be had, so I love that we met and that you were here and a guest, and thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad that I got to be here.
Yeah, and this was awesome. Alright, everybody, that's it for today's episode. I will see you next week. As always, be sure to jump out to my website, debbiecaudle.com, and check out the free resources or give me a call and let's actually try to keep your marriage from getting to the point where you need Shaughness, because that's the first step. And if that doesn't work, then comes Shaughness. But let's actually try to save this first. All right, we'll see y'all next week.